to be north of the Arctic Circle, which is the approximate limit of the midnight sun and the polar night. The Arctic is divided into the High Arctic, the Low Arctic, and the Subarctic. The High Arctic ecoregion encompasses most of the Canadian Arctic archipelago, Svalbard, parts of Greenland, and offlying islands of Russia, like Novaya Zemlya, Severnaya Zemlya, Franz Josef Land, New Siberian Islands, and Wrangel Island. The High Arctic is generally distinguished by having more severe environmental conditions and an extreme form of Arctic tundra, known as polar desert. The climate is very dry and cold. Average annual temperature is about -16 to -18 degrees Celsius. Mean summer temperature is 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. Depending on the location, winter mean temperature range between -12 and -32 degrees Celsius. Precipitation is very low, ranging mostly less than 400 millimeters. Biodiversity is low. Only 1,700 species of plants grow there, and less than 50 land mammals can be found. The dominant vegetation are mosses, lichen, and cold hardy vascular plants, like sedge and cotton grass. In areas with milder and wet climate can develop up to 60% of wooden rush, wire rush, and saxifrage. The notable animals in the region are muskox, reindeers, polar bears, Arctic foxes, Arctic hares, and lemmings. Marine mammals include walrus, seal, and a variety of whales. Representative birds include brent goose, ivory gull, species of sandpiper, snowy owl, jaeger, snow bunting, common redpoll, and other. Most birds are migratory. During very short northern summer, Arctic animals feed and reproduce. In both Siberia and Canada, many of the species migrate southwards to avoid cold. However, most warm-blooded have to conserve their warmth by growing thick fur or plumage, or by accumulating layers of fat. Even in high Arctic region, some insects can be found. For example, mosquitoes, bumblebees, and some butterflies. They might be considered as possible vectors to some diseases. They show special adaptation to their rough circumstances, such as cold hardiness and good timing in their behavior and life cycles. Climate change may affect critically to these, which might lead to unpredictable effects. The high Arctic is remote and sparsely populated. Greatest part of the ecoregion can be considered as intact. The vast distances and challenging climate are the reason the distinctive indigenous Arctic culture have survived throughout the centuries. Main anthropogenic activities in the high Arctic are tourism and research. High Arctic is one of the areas in the world that is mostly heavily affected by the climate change. That's why it is very important to monitor the infectious diseases in the environment that is changing constantly, so they are picked up early enough. Polar bears are affected by, for example, toxoplasmosis, rabies, canine distemper, and brucellosis. Many of these diseases affect other Arctic wildlife as well. Toxoplasma gondii is a parasitic protozoan that infects warm-blooded animals and causes toxoplasmosis. Felids are Toxoplasma's definitive hosts, meaning that it can reproduce sexually only in their intestines, and other animals are its intermediate hosts. Toxoplasmosis is usually a disease that goes unnoticed because of the mild flu-like symptoms. However, it can be severe or even fatal in young and immunocompromised humans and animals and causes encephalitis, chorioretinitis, and neurological illnesses, for example. If Toxoplasma infects an animal or a human for the first time during pregnancy, it can cause these symptoms and other problems to fetus, and it can even cause stillbirth. Toxoplasmosis has been studied to alter the behavior of an animal and even a human to a more risk-taking and dangerous way. Toxoplasmosis has a comparatively high prevalence in humans and many other animal populations. It is of importance to a human population because it is zoonotic and it affects livestock and pets too. Because toxoplasmosis isn't very harmful to the most of the population, it isn't considered a very dangerous disease. Though it can be harmful combined with other factors such as climate change and habitat loss, all stressing the wildlife population. Emerging of Toxoplasma gondii in Arctic is an interesting issue since in many high Arctic areas there are no wild cat species. In Svalbard, domestic cats are forbidden except a few indoor cats. The parasite is nevertheless capable to reproduce asexually as well, and it is known that exposure to toxoplasmosis is not solely driven by ingesting the oocyst from the environment. One possible way to get toxoplasmosis is transferring tachyozoids from placenta to fetus. Besides congenital route, ingesting predazoids from infected meat is another possibility. In areas where there are felids, oocysts can be found almost everywhere in environments. They are even capable to survive long periods in seawater. Ungulates like caribou, moose and muskox in high Arctic areas have often high seroprevalence of toxoplasmosis. In semi-domesticated reindeer, feeding and age correlated strongly with seropositivity. Since climate change may affect snow depth and emergence of storms, it might also theoretically increase the prevalence among reindeer. It can also disturb the balance between seasonal growth of vegetation and yearly cycles of reindeer living. Wolverines live in high Arctic areas, but they move long distances. Thus, one animal can easily spend a lot of time in higher areas where there is no felids and get infected from environmental oocysts. Since wolverines are scavengers, they may also get infected from carcasses. The main source of food for Arctic fox are also carcasses as well as migratory birds and their eggs. Birds could be one risk factor considered about spreading of toxoplasmosis. They move long distances and belong to menu of many predators. At least there has been genes with seropositivity for toxoplasmosis. Also, wolves can get infected. In one Alaskan research, seropositivity in wolves was higher than in reindeer, which might be a sign of an unidentified source of vertical transmission. Bears have been tested as well. At least grizzly bears and polar bears get infected, with seroprevalence being pretty high in polar bears. On conservation medicine point of view, Arctic toxoplasmosis is significant since we know only very little about it yet. Hygiene is one of the best ways not to get exposed. Culture puts northern people in significant risk. In many ethnic groups, traditional way of cooking involve raw meat, uncleaned water, berry picnic and fishing. Climate change is one of the most significant risks considering of toxoplasmosis spreading. Hygiene and awareness of the disease and risks predisposing for it are key factors when trying to avoid toxoplasmosis. That's why it would be very important to understand better the parasite's role in environment, people and wildlife.